Freddy with FreddyCanFly. Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be continuing on with, of course, the NiTron build and assembly. We are going to be moving past. In our previous segment, we went ahead and did the fuel tank. Got all the plumbing and everything done. If you haven't seen that video yet, feel free to watch it. But now we're almost done with the mainframe, guys. This thing is almost at that point where we're going to be able to take it out and fly it. So today we're going to be focusing down on the installation of the motor. I have myself here an OS55. It is the regulated, so like I've talked about a few times, we'll be using the crankcase or back pressure system as compared to some of them that have the muffler pressure. My motor is new, so if yours is used, you'll want to make sure, just for the sake of your machine and everything, go ahead and do a full teardown on it. And just make sure the internals are working appropriately. If yours is brand new out of the box, there's not really much you got to do. Just pop in the glow plug and do all that stuff. I'm actually going to pop my glow plug out here. So anyways, I've got my motor out. I've got that ready. I've got my brand new glow plug out. We're going to want to go ahead and throw that in so we can patch up and finish the glow ignition system. Get out your motor mounts. An important thing to address at this point in time as well. Depending on how you ordered your kit and what kind of blades you wanted to use. So I'll be using my 600mm blades. So of course mine came with the 21 tooth pinion. Based on what pinion you order with your kit, it's also going to determine what shims are going to come with your motor mounts. Now our motor mounts are labeled with an L and an R, right? So you've got your left and right, if we can see that on there. So we can get that. Maybe, maybe not. But they have an L and an R, but you'll see that they've got the little shim there. This shim came with the 21 tooth pinion, so that's what I'm going to be using. If I were to order like the 24 tooth pinion, it's going to come with a different set of shims that I can swap out and replace just for the lining up and everything. Okay, so just a quick fun fact, get your mounting blocks out for the motor, get the motor out. Fan shroud, go ahead and get that out. I'm going to give you guys a quick pro tip because I have ruined so many fan shrouds that it's been frustrating as all heck. Okay, don't try to just install your fan shroud and jam in these bolts. So it's got let's see, it's got 3 different hex bolts that lock into the other side to bring it and seat it together. You got 1, 2, and then 3 right here. The opposing side of your fan shroud is not pre-tapped. So what I do is I take an X-Acto knife and I slightly bevel the other side, and then I pre-thread it all the way in, and then I'm going to take this back apart. That way when I go to install it into the machine, my pre-tapped bolts, because they're not self-tapping screws, right? They're just machine screws. Once you round out your fan shroud, you're kind of screwed. You got to buy a new one. So make sure that your threads are secure. Just a quick tip. Get all that work done beforehand. It just saves you some time. So get the fan shroud done. Get out your clutch, which at this point, up until the build, we've had removed from the machine because we had to do things like epoxy in our magnets and what have you, so we didn't want to cause any damage there. It is still greased very well. And then we'll go ahead and get out this piece. So this will be your fan and your fan hub. We'll have to do some disassembly here. Now another quick thing to note, which we'll go over here in the manual in just a moment, is your motor should be the one that supplies the locking nut and also the washer. That does not come in your kit, and to the best of my knowledge it isn't provided with, well, any nitro kit that I've ever used. Okay, so make sure you have all that. And that should be just about what we need to get everything assembled in, guys. So let's jump over to the manual real fast. And let's kind of do a visual image of what we're trying to complete here. Oh yeah, so as it specifies here, right, so the nut and the washer are not provided by, or they're provided by the engine manufacturer. But you'll see here we'll start off with our fan assembly. Of course, the propelling fins of the fan should be in the right orientation. Make sure you apply your Loctite. Everything's easy and basic there. This here is important. Okay, there is 2 different ways. Well, I mean, I could say there's 3 or 4, but I'll say there's 2 different practical ways in which you can complete this assembly. And this assembly plays a huge role. In most cases, your fan mount, the reason why it's split down the sides is it's going to be more of a pressure fit. You'll see here that once you get past the threads, your motor shaft here is a larger diameter. Usually the way you get this on is you're going to pressure fit by tightening the nut. And as the nut tightens, it sinks the fan hub down until it bottoms out on that plastic washer. Now, how do you do this? Well, you're going to want to take off the back plate of your motor. You've got 4 screws. And you can either use they have a crankshaft locking tool that you can buy. They're kind of hard to come by these days, but if you have one, great. Or you can use the end of a rubberized tool, and you can jam it in the back, and you can lock the piston down and go ahead and tighten down your bolt. If you use method 2, be very, very careful that you don't wrench down so much that you cause any internal damage on the motor, okay? I'll try to show that part to you guys as I get near it with the construction, but that's usually what I've always done, and it's always worked pretty damn easy. So moving forward though, once we get past that point, you'll go ahead and throw the clutch on. Again, make sure you're very well greased up. That's going to cover up the nut though, so make sure that this assembly is done first and it's done correctly. We'll throw on our shims and our engine mounts, using Loctite appropriately on those as well. Moving forward. Take some of the engine frame. So this part here is going to be important too. So this is where we're going to line up everything. And the guys, again, it should be pretty self-explanatory. So you're going to want to loosen up all these bolts here. So your clutch stack assembly, which we haven't Loctited yet, go ahead and loosen those up. And then on both sides here, you'll go ahead and fasten in your frame bolts, which will go into the motor mounts. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to not apply any Loctite. I'm going to fit in my motor, jimmy it around a little bit, right? Play with the biasing back and forth on the clutch stack until I get a perfectly aligned fit. Then I'll come back and take one bolt out at a time and Loctite them. It does say here to do crosswise tightening for the 4 screws too, so make sure it's nice and squared up with the frames and with the clutch stack. That's going to be very important. You can get a lot of different vibration issues and stuff like this from this particular part of the build if you have parts that aren't running straight or true, okay? So just make sure you pay close attention. And then after that, it'll have us complete the fan shroud. Again, don't forget that you have some of these screws on here that allow the fan shroud to shift forward and backwards. You're going to want to make sure that the fan shroud does not touch the fan itself. Otherwise, again, you're going to get some parts having issues and vibrations and what have you. And then we should arrive at this part where we do the bottom tray assembly and the landing skid. So I'm going to get the machine up to this point, but there are going to be some spots I'm going to demonstrate. So let's jump back over to the bench real fast. First things first, guys, let me go ahead and get us to a certain point. I'm going to break down the fan hub and the fan hub and the fan, if you will. And I'm going to go ahead and take my washer and my bolt off, take off my back plate, and I'm going to show you guys how I use what method I use to go ahead and lock everything down. Alrighty guys, a couple of quick things to note here is I've went ahead and I've Loctited and got my fan hub onto my fan shroud. Take in mind, I did a cross pattern, you know, bolting with these, you know, tighten this one, tighten this one, tighten this one, tighten this one. And then I applied my Loctite onto everything, so that's good to go. I also, on the bottom side, you'll see it has the clamping mechanism. See if we can get that. There we go. Got the clamping mechanism there. I removed the bolts entirely from that because we're gonna want to do that afterwards. Now for your motor, very important. Make sure you have a clean workbench surface. You don't want to get any dirt, debris, shards of metal or anything inside your motor because you're going to try to start the motor and it could cause damage. Second thing is the nut on the motor. Okay, so I'm going to take the nut off. I'm going to leave the plastic washer on there. Okay, you don't want to lose that, so I'm going to make sure it stays on there. I'll try as hard as I can to capture this, guys, but it's more of a up-close visual feel kind of a thing. But the nut that goes onto the motor is important because there's an orientation for it. It has almost a completely flat cut surface on the bottom, and then on the top it's actually got more of a beveled surface. Okay, Not that it's going to probably cause any harm or damage if you do it backwards, but the flat spot is going to be able to sit the most flush and flat inside the little divot of the fan hub there. So just look at the nut. You can see it. It's clean as day. Like when you actually hold it in your hand and you're looking at it, you can tell very easily that the bottom is like completely flat, almost as if it's been sanded, and the top part is beveled. Okay, so make sure you don't mix that up. And then, next thing that's going to be of importance here is I'm going to go ahead and remove my case. Make sure whether you're using back pressure or muffler pressure, it doesn't matter. Don't lose orientation of how this comes off, because on every single motor, you'll notice on mine, there is a flat spot on the back case. That flat spot allows clearance for the piston to move, and if you put this in wrong and try to start your motor again, you're going to cause some pretty excessive damage potentially. And also, don't ruin your rubber O-ring or anything like that. But with the back plate pressure, it's pretty easy because it's got that sensor spot that you can mount. That always faces backwards, so mine's pretty easy. But I'm going to set it off to the side in a nice clean area. And now we can see what I was talking about. So you can see the internals of the motor. You can see the crankshaft there. So if you have a crankshaft locking tool, you put it like this, and then the locking tool just sits in the back here, and it kind of forks around that so that you can tighten. I'm going to be using the just old school method, guys. I mean, I'm not too worried. So I've got a tool here with a rubberized grip, nice and soft. And then what you're going to want to do is realize, okay, so we're trying to go clockwise. So we're going to be turning the crankshaft this way, so to speak, if we were tightening the nut. So if you look right there, if it's straight, I should be able to take my little rubberized tool, and if I place it ever so gently right inside there like this, it locks down that crankshaft there, you know, crank rod, torque rod, whatever the heck you guys want to call it, and it makes it to where now I can tighten down the nut, okay? Once you get down to the base, guys, just give it a quick torque and leave it. It's not going to come off. A lot of people try to overdo this, and then what happens is this, the crank rod here will start to eat or clamp down through the metal, or the rubber onto the metal of this handle, and it causes damage, or you don't want to warp or damage anything inside. So once this is all done, your motor should still run absolutely smooth with zero binding or notching. So if you do choose to use this method, please note I am not responsible for any damages that may occur. You do so at your own risk. But it's really not that hard, guys. It's kind of dummy proof. So let me get all that done. Do not forget to heavily Loctite these threads, okay? And by heavily, I mean I usually just run a bead across the whole thing, and then I work it in with my fingers. Clean this with rubbing alcohol. Make sure it's really, really clean, because it's very, very oily, okay? Make sure it's clean so the Loctite adheres. Let me get this step done, guys, and then we'll come back and do a quick review on it. Alrighty, guys, here she is. So I went ahead, I reinstalled back on the back plate. Take in mind, these don't need to be Loctited, guys. It's a motor. You know, when it gets hot, you can always sink these back down a little bit more to compensate for the expansion and contraction of metal with heat. But you can see here, okay, so everything is nice and free. That's the important part. And I've got the bolt locked all the way down, as tight as I could possibly go without causing any potential damage. Now take in mind, for those of you guys that might be new to nitro, I don't have my glow plug in, so I am free to spin the case. If I actually plug up this hole or I put a glow plug in, you actually start creating pressure now. So even right there, I can barely turn it. It starts to pop, pop. So that's the kind of effect you're going to get when you do put in your glow plug. So I like to do that right before I put it into the motor. I'm going to leave it off for now just so I can test the freeness of everything. Out of the box, sometimes your carburetor is not perfectly 90. Sometimes it's kind of tilted. So for that, again, just loosen up your carburetor screw here, and then 90 everything out, because in the helicopter it's going to need to be 90, and then tighten that back down. Again, you don't need Loctite or anything on that. But this is what we're just checking for, guys. Also, you can kind of look at the fan. What I do is line up my eyesight with the top of the fan and just check for any imperfections, see if anything looks imbalanced, is anything going to cause me a problem. I'm not gonna lie to you, it doesn't hurt to take a tool and check every single screw on the header. Once this goes in, guys, it's kind of a pain in the ass to take a motor back out. It's really not hard. It's just time consuming. So I like to double check everything. Even though with OS, I've never had anything that's subpar come out of their factory. I mean, it's always been spot on. But so everything looks good there. I'm happy. So of course next, you'll notice that with the clutch assembly, it did give you some pretty large sized bolts. I believe that they were, we're looking at a 3mm tool for the bolts on the clutch stack, or I'm sorry, the clutch itself. And again, guys, with these, it's not one of those parts that you have to Loctite so heavily that if you ever get into a crash, you can't remove. I mean, it's all counter torqued and everything with the way that this stuff spins. So what I usually do, guys, is I have a small little drop of Loctite that I put on like that. And as long as you take the Loctite and actually thread it into the threads, I've got it all over my fingers now, I wipe off the excess and then go ahead and just set her in and leave it. Even with that being said, when you Loctite appropriately by threading in the Loctite, you don't have to worry about over tightening as well. A lot of people that I see do builds, they put a big old glob on there and they just send it home. And the problem with that is as you're threading, that pool of Loctite that you've created is now also threading up as well. And so you get a big old seepage of Loctite at the top of your screw, and then it hardens on and it basically mates parts together. And then when you have a crash or an accident, or you need to do some of that yearly maintenance or whatever, you find that you can't get your things apart easily. Now you're busting out heat guns and getting crazy on stuff. So like for example with my clutch right there, okay, so you guys just watched how I Loctited it, and I'm at that point right now where I can finger snug that down, right? You can see that the tool is just, it breaks right there and it snugs, right? I'll check this side. Let's see, it breaks right there and it snugs. Okay, so I've got them finger snug on both, and then all I'm going to do is just give them one quick and easy torque. Boom, done. Get this one done. I'm not going to sit there and wrench on that anymore. If it's Loctited correctly and it's torqued down just enough, you have no reason as to why that clutch should ever come off. I mean, if so, then maybe your Loctite's defective or something. So anyways, guys, I just wanted to show you what my motor turned out like, okay? Obviously from here, I'm going to go ahead and let's get the motor mounts on with the shims for the correct pinion, right? Make sure you've got that whole thing set up appropriately. I am at this time going to install my glow plug. The glow plug does not receive Loctite, okay? Do not put Loctite on your glow plug. Let me repeat that. Do not put Loctite on your glow plug, okay? Trust me, it's not a good thing. And then I'm going to go ahead and line everything up, and we'll get it kind of test fitted into the helicopter. And I'll show you guys what it looks like and feels like before I put on the fan shroud. Alrighty guys, I wanted to show you real quick just a couple of tips and tricks on getting the motor installed. It can be a little finicky. So I've got my mounts on, taking account for my shims based on my pin on my clutch stack. Got the clutch installed, got everything installed. Glow plug is in, okay? So we're good to go. So all you're really going to want to do is, thing one, is I've went ahead and I've loosened up the clutch stack, so now I can actually shift it forward and backwards, okay? Not sloppy loose that it's moving around too much, but, you know, loose enough. If I get all my other wires out of the way, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to tip the Heli up like this. Let's actually get a bit of a zoom out so you guys can see. So I'm going to tip the Heli up on its side like this. I mean, you can do it any way that's easy for you, but I'm just going to kind of line up the back mounting brackets right here for the motor, slide them in. Now take in mind the clutch stack has to meet right into the clutch, okay? So that's why we wanted to loosen this up. So I'm going to kind of get it in there. You'll notice, don't force it, let it kind of ease its way in there. There you go, boom, and it fits right into place. Now, is this a perfect alignment? The answer is no, it is not. There's a lot wrong with this. Not by design or anything, but by the fact that we need to do some steps here, okay? So what I'm going to do from this point is, once I get that kind of just very gently put in, is, as it kind of specified in the manual, or as I talked about earlier, is I'm going to put on, one at a time, I'm going to put on the bolts that actually mount the motor. Because what we want to do is if you notice on the frames, the motor mounts cannot be biased forward or backwards, right? They're fixed into place. So if I can, so we'll just lay it on its side here, that'll be a little bit easier. If I can take the motor and move it around ever so gently, I want to get the motor somewhat fixed or somewhat hard mounted in, that way I can move my clutch stack forward or backwards and find that sweet spot for it too. And then what I'll do is I'll lock down the clutch stack and then come back and revisit these bolts right here, okay? So you guys want to make sure, one of the biggest issues I see with nitro helicopters is the motor mounting and installation. Because if you just throw it in and let it be, I guess if that's a more appropriate way to say it, and just leave it alone, you got to realize that nitros, what are they most known for, right? Vibrations and gyro issues and this and that. Well, this motor shakes like a son of a gun the entire time. I mean, it's very, very, I think they consider it to be like a high frequency kind of vibration, you know, it's very frequent. And if your main source of vibration isn't even properly assembled in the first place, how do you think the rest of the machine's going to handle? Also take in mind, I chose to mount my gyro right in front where it's basically the closest to the source of vibration as possible. So I definitely want to pay close attention to making sure the motor is as square as humanly possible. I've said that like 1,000 times now, but I only repeat myself because I want to stress the importance. So as you guys noticed, okay, so I put in those 4 bolts. The motor is, for basically all intents and purposes, kind of locked down now, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with my clutch bell. And for this, what we're looking for is, okay, so if I try to bias this forward or backwards now, you'll notice it really can't. But there is some play. There is a little bit. And we want to get that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look down at the clutch stack, and I'm going to make sure that it's sitting 90 degrees to the fan. But you want to also move this, move your clutch bell. It shouldn't be grabbing, it shouldn't be grinding, it shouldn't be doing anything besides acting perfectly smooth. Okay, so if it does, what we can do is let's go in and I'm just going to lightly tighten these down. I'm not clamping them yet, but I'm going to tighten these down. And I want to try to get this as true as possible. So put that in. Now some guys will put in a starter shaft and actually crank the motor a few turns. You can. I would recommend doing that by removing the glow plug though. That way you don't get a lot of dry pressure and stuff in here, because this motor hasn't been ran, which means the parts haven't been mated, it hasn't been brought up to temp. And if you just sit there and crank on it with all that pressure, it's not really a good look. So just kind of play with everything, guys. If I turn my starter shaft clockwise, it shouldn't engage, but it should be free. If I turn it counterclockwise, it should grab the motor. You can see that it does. You can see the fan movement. Sorry, it's got pressure in there. Clutch bell is free. I mean, I think that's the sweet spot right there, guys. Everything looks good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to take all these screws one at a time. One out, Loctite back in. One out, Loctite back in. Do them in crisscross patterns. Make sure everything stays square. And then I'm going to come back and put the fan shroud on, and I'll do the bottom landing skids, and we'll do us a final review. Alrighty guys, so here it is. We are on landing skids, and we have got our motor installed. And she is looking pretty damn clean, if I do say so myself. Honestly, all that's really left to do, which again we're gonna finish. I think we've only got one video left or so, guys, and this thing should be ready. But we'll talk a little bit about plumbing the fuel tank. Please take in mind, I'm not going to get too far in depth with that, because I don't know if you guys are using a muffler pressure system, or if you're using the back plate or whatever, but. You can follow your instruction manual to do all the fuel plumbing for that aspect. You know, things like the setup and programming, again, is going to be specific to each fly barless system that you guys choose to fly. But essentially from here we just need to install the main rotor and main gear, and the tail rotor and tail belt, and then just do our programming, guys, and we're good to go. So follow me on to the next video. It should be the last video in this series. That way we can complete the NiTron and get it off the bench and get it out up into the air. Any other last minute notes that I can think of? Tightening down the fan shroud, guys. Again, make sure that it is nice and free. You can stick your finger under here and you can spin the fan. And just make sure that the fan's not interacting at all with the fan shroud. It should be perfectly smooth. I found that I had to bias these up just a little bit and get them all locked down really nice and tight. Other than that, my glow starter system, actually, let me show you what I did on the bottom. So in order to ground down to my, ground down to my motor, you can see that the black cable, the black ground comes and wraps around. Did a couple zip ties there and then just fastened it to the back case of the motor. Hopefully you can see the red alligator clip there, connects to the front. So overall with the wiring, this thing turned out pretty clean, guys. Take in mind the wiring hanging out the front here is for my programming cable. I'm going to tuck that away and you won't see it. So the NiTron is essentially finished. Again, besides in the next video, guys, but I mean this thing just turned out beautiful. I dare to say it's one of the cleanest builds I think I've ever completed, and I've done almost all the machines out there. Not all of them, but a huge majority of them. And this thing just, they nailed everything. I think it looks beautiful. So, thanks so much for watching, guys. Any questions about this particular video, feel free to comment and subscribe down below. Hit the like button if need be, or you guys can reach out to me on Facebook or IM or anything like that. So, thanks so much for watching, my friends. Remember, Freddy can fly, so can you.